She found 20 men in black coats standing in a perfect circle around her father's grave at midnight. What she didn't know, the debt he came to repay would bind her fate to his forever, and both vampires and humans would hunt her for it. The cemetery gates shouldn't have been open at midnight. Ashley Miller stood at the rusted entrance of Hollow Grove Cemetery, her father's funeral program still crumpled in her coat pocket. 1 week. It had been exactly 1 week since they'd lowered David Miller into the cold Massachusetts soil, and she hadn't been able to sleep through a single night. The insomnia wasn't from grief alone, though God knows there was plenty of that. It was the dreams. Every night, the same vision. Her father standing at the foot of her bed, lips moving urgently, but no sound coming out. Behind him, shadows stretched across her bedroom wall, taking the shape of men in long coats. It was 11:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, walking through an unlocked cemetery gate that the groundskeeper swore he locked every evening at 6:00. The October air bit through her thin jacket as she navigated the winding path toward her father's plot. Dead leaves crunched under her sneakers. In the distance, the old oak tree near her father's grave swayed in the wind, its branches scraping the sky like skeletal fingers. She'd brought a thermos of coffee, her father's favorite, the kind he'd make every Sunday morning with too much sugar and a splash of cream. It was stupid, maybe, but grief made you do stupid things. Made you talk to headstones, made you drive 40 minutes in the middle of the night because you couldn't stand the silence in your apartment anymore. Ashley rounded the final curve in the path, and her footsteps faltered. The oak tree wasn't swaying alone. 20 figures stood in a perfect circle around her father's grave, so still they could have been statues. Each wore a long black coat that fell to their ankles, the fabric untouched by the wind that whipped through the cemetery. Their faces were pale, impossibly pale, catching the silver light of the full moon like polished marble. The thermos slipped from Ashley's hand, coffee splashing across the path. None of them moved. None of them even seemed to breathe. At the center of the circle, directly over her father's headstone, knelt a man who made the others look ordinary. His hair was jet black, falling past his shoulders in a way that should have looked unkempt, but instead seemed deliberately wild. He wore the same black coat, but his was fastened with silver buttons that gleamed like stars. Even from 20 feet away, Ashley could see his skin had an otherworldly quality. Not just pale, but luminescent as if lit from within. He held something in his hand. A rose, blood red and fresh, as if it had just been cut. Ashley's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around and sprint back to her car, but her feet stayed planted to the ground, and her voice, when it finally came, sounded stronger than she felt. "What the hell are you doing at my father's grave?" 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her in perfect unison. The movement was too synchronized, too fluid, too inhuman. The kneeling man didn't look up immediately. Instead, he placed the red rose carefully on the granite headstone, his fingers lingering on the carved letters of her father's name. David Miller, beloved father and friend. "Debt must be repaid in full," the man said softly, his voice carrying across the distance with impossible clarity. It had a musical quality, like wind chimes made of crystal. Ashley's hand crept toward her phone in her pocket. "I'm calling the police." The man finally looked up, and Ashley's breath caught in her throat. His eyes were red, not bloodshot, not brown, catching the light wrong, pure crimson like rubies held up to flame. They fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Your father saved my life," he continued, rising to his feet in one smooth motion. He was tall, at least 6'3", and moved with a predator's grace. 20 years ago, David Miller gave me something no one else would, a chance. My father didn't know anyone like you." But even as she said it, Ashley remembered the locked study, the drawer her father never let her open, the way he'd sometimes stare out the window at night, watching the street as if expecting someone. The man took a step forward, and the circle of figures shifted with him, maintaining their perfect formation. He knew me better than anyone. He was the only human who ever looked at me and saw a person instead of a monster. Human. The word slipped out before Ashley could stop it. A sad smile crossed the man's face. "My name is Victor Sterling. I am or was the king of the Eastern Vampire Courts." He gestured to the figures around him. "These are my guards. We've come to fulfill an oath your father and I made 2 decades ago." Ashley laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Vampires, right? And I suppose you're here to drink my blood." "No, Miss Miller." Victor's expression turned deadly serious. "We're here to protect it. Your father saved my life when my own kind had sentenced me to death. In return, I swore a blood debt, eternal protection for his bloodline. For you." The wind picked up, and one of the guards' coats billowed open. Ashley caught a glimpse of what looked like weapons, not guns but blades of an antique design, handles wrapped in leather that had clearly seen centuries of use. "You're insane," she whispered, but her voice shook. Victor tilted his head, studying her. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, tossing it toward her. Ashley caught it instinctively. It was a pocket watch, old and tarnished, with an intricate pattern engraved on the cover. She'd seen it before. Her father had kept it on his desk, though she'd never seen it work. "Open it," Victor said. Inside, beneath the frozen watch hands, were initials carved into the silver. V.A. Victor Sterling. "He kept it all these years," Victor murmured, something like wonder in his voice, "even when I told him he didn't have to." Ashley looked up, and in that moment she saw past the red eyes and pale skin to the grief etched in the vampire's face. Whatever he was, whatever this was, his sorrow was real. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come to his grave now?" "Because the debt isn't settled, Ms. Miller, and there are others, both human and vampire, who would see you dead to ensure it never will be." Victor's eyes blazed brighter. "Your father protected me once. Now it's my turn to protect you, whether you want me to or not." Before Ashley could respond, one of the guards suddenly stiffened. "Sire," the figure said, a woman's voice sharp with warning, "we're being watched." Victor had snapped toward the tree line, and Ashley followed his gaze. For just a moment, she saw them. 3 more figures in the shadows between the trees, these ones crouched and ready to spring. "Run," Victor said quietly. "What?" The shadows exploded into motion, and Ashley finally did what her instincts had been screaming at her to do since she'd first seen the circle of men in black coats. She ran, slamming it behind her and throwing the deadbolt. Her hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the chain lock in place. She'd run. God, how she'd run. Through the cemetery, past rows of headstones that blurred together in the moonlight, her feet pounding against the gravel path, while inhuman shrieks echoed behind her. She hadn't dared look back. Not when she heard the sound of bodies colliding. Not when something that sounded like metal rang out in the darkness. Not even when a voice that might have been Victor shouted something in a language she didn't recognize. She'd reached her car, peeled out of the parking lot, and driven home 15 miles over the speed limit, checking her rearview mirror every 3 seconds. Nothing had followed her, at least nothing she could see. Now, standing in her small Boston apartment with her back pressed against the door, Ashley tried to convince herself it had all been some kind of hallucination, stress-induced psychosis, a grief-triggered breakdown, except the pocket watch was still in her hand, warm and solid and real. She stumbled to her bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, avoiding her own eyes in the mirror. When she finally looked up, she barely recognized herself. Hair wild, mascara smeared, face pale as those things in the cemetery. "Not real," she whispered to her reflection. "Not real, not real." She repeated it like a mantra as she changed into pajamas, as she checked every window lock twice as she wedged a chair under her bedroom doorknob. She was still repeating it when she finally collapsed onto her bed, still fully dressed under the covers, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building made her jump. Every shadow seemed to move. When dawn finally broke through her curtains, Ashley felt like she'd aged 10 years in one night. She dragged herself out of bed, made coffee with shaking hands, and tried to pretend everything was normal. She made it 3 steps toward her front door before she saw it. A black rose lay on her doormat, its petals so dark they seemed to absorb the light. A drop of what looked like morning dew clung to one petal, except when Ashley bent closer, she realized it wasn't dew at all. It was red. Next to the rose lay a sealed envelope made of thick cream-colored paper that looked like it belonged in a museum. Her father's name was written across it in elegant, flowing script. David Miller, keeper of the old ways. Ashley's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. She snatched up the envelope with trembling hands and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the same antique quality, covered in that same beautiful handwriting. To the one who gave me life, I return what was owed. The debt spans 20 years, but blood remembers what time forgets. Your daughter carries your courage and your curse. I will not fail you, old friend. Those who hunt in the dark already know she exists. They will come for her as they once came for you, but where you stood alone, she will not. The circle holds. The oath remains until the debt is settled. V.A. Ashley read it 3 times, her mind racing. The handwriting was old-fashioned, the kind people used with fountain pens and careful practice, not the hasty scrawl of modern times. The paper itself felt ancient, slightly rough under her fingers, but it was the words that made her blood run cold. Your curse? What curse? Her father had been a high school history teacher, for God's sake. He'd coached her soccer team. He'd made terrible dad jokes and burned every Thanksgiving turkey. He hadn't been cursed. He hadn't known vampire kings. He hadn't. Ashley's thoughts stuttered to a halt as she remembered something. The locked study. After the funeral, she'd been too grief-stricken to go through her father's things, but now she grabbed her keys and was out the door in minutes, the letter clutched in her hand. Her father's house was only 20 minutes away, a modest 2-story in Cambridge that always smelled like old books and pine. Ashley's hands shook as she unlocked the door, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as she stepped inside. The study was on the 2nd floor, doors still locked as it had been since her father's death. Ashley had inherited his key ring, and she fumbled through them until she found the small brass key he never let her touch. The lock clicked open. The study was exactly mine, carried his humanity. We were no longer separate beings, but 2 parts of a whole. And now, I'm part of that whole. Yes. Michael moved to the circle's edge, kneeling. Jennifer, I need you to understand something. This ritual, if we attempt it, there's a strong chance it will kill you. But if we don't attempt it, you die anyway. And so do I. What are the odds? Jennifer asked. If we try the modified version, Michael was quiet for a long moment. 10%, maybe less. And if we do the full ritual, the sacrifice, 100% success, I live. John. Jennifer looked at the blood-stained platform, thinking of her father kneeling here 20 years ago, bleeding himself nearly to death for a vampire he'd known for only 3 days. What had he been thinking? Had he been afraid? Or had he seen something in Michael worth dying for? Show me, she said finally. Show me how the ritual works. Michael rose and stepped into the circle. Immediately the carvings began to glow, silver light spreading across the stone like liquid metal. He drew a blade from his coat, ancient-looking, with a handle wrapped in red leather. The ritual requires blood given freely, he explained, rolling up his sleeve. The heir and the oath-giver bleeding together within the circle. The sigils channeled the essence, allowing it to transfer. He drew the blade across his palm. Dark blood welled up, and where it dripped onto the circle, the silver light turned crimson. In the full ritual I would drain you completely, Michael continued, his voice clinical now, as if discussing anything other than her death. Your blood, your life force, your very soul, all absorbed into me. The debt would be fulfilled, the bond broken, and I would be restored to full strength. And in the modified version, I take only what's needed to stabilize me enough to slow the decay, buy us time to find another solution. But the bond remains, and we have to repeat the ritual every few weeks until... He trailed off. Until I run out of blood to give, Jennifer finished. Death by installments instead of all at once. There has to be another way. Michael's hand clenched around the blade. Your father was researching something before he died. He believed he'd found a method to break the bond without sacrifice, but he never told me the details. He said it was too dangerous, that I'd never allow it. Where's his research? That's what I don't know. He kept his final notes hidden, said he'd reveal them when the time was right. Michael looked up at her, but he died before he could. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. General James descended, his expression grave. "My king, we have a problem. Robert didn't leave the area. He's gathering forces in the woods." And he hesitated. "We intercepted a message to the West Coast courts. He's calling for a full assault." Jennifer felt ice flood her veins. "How many?" "At least 50 vampires." James looked between them. "We're outnumbered 2-1, sire. If you were at full strength, the odds wouldn't matter. But as you are now—" He didn't need to finish. They all knew what he meant. Michael was dying. And come dawn, Robert would have an easy victory, unless they performed the ritual first. Michael turned to Jennifer, and she saw the anguish in his crimson eyes. "I won't force you, but if we don't act tonight, we do the modified ritual," Jennifer said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "We buy time, find my father's research, and hope there's a real solution in there. Michael, my father gave his blood for you. I can do the same." She stepped toward the circle, then paused. "But Michael, when we find another way, and we will find another way, you're going to tell me everything. Every detail about this bond, about my family's history, about why you've protected us for 138 years. No more secrets." A ghost of a smile crossed Michael's face. "No more secrets." He extended his hand across the glowing circle. Jennifer took it, and the ritual began. Jennifer woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and her entire body screaming in protest. Every muscle ached, her head pounded, and when she lifted her hand to shield her eyes from the light, she saw the bandage wrapped around her palm, white gauze spotted with dried blood. The ritual, the circle, the feeling of her blood leaving her body, while crimson light pulsed around them. Michael's essence pouring into her even as hers flowed into him. She'd passed out halfway through, the pain too intense to endure conscious. "You're awake." David appeared in the doorway carrying a tray. "Good. You need to eat and drink this. It's water mixed with iron supplements," and he paused. "Some of the king's blood." Jennifer pushed herself upright, ignoring the way the room spun. "Where's Michael?" "Dealing with Robert's forces. They attacked at dawn as promised, but—" David grinned, setting the tray on her lap. "Let's just say the ritual worked better than we hoped. The king tore through them like he did in the old days. Robert retreated with what was left of his vampires about an hour ago." Relief flooded through her. "So we have more time." "Maybe Robert won't give up that easily." David's smile faded. "But there's another problem. While you were unconscious, humans showed up." "What humans?" "The kind with badges and weapons that make my skin itch." David moved to the window, peering out carefully. "They've set up a perimeter about half a mile out, not moving in yet, just watching." Jennifer threw off the covers, ignoring David's protests. She stumbled to the window and looked out over the forest. Sure enough, she could see them. Black SUVs parked in a cleared area, figures in tactical gear moving between the vehicles. "Who are they?" she asked. David's young face looked worried. "They're equipped with UV weapons, silver ammunition, and something else. Canisters that James says smell like concentrated sunlight." "That's not possible." "Tell that to them." David handed her the glass of red-tinged water. "Drink. You lost a lot of blood." Jennifer sipped it, trying not to think about what she was consuming. The liquid tasted metallic but not unpleasant, and warmth immediately spread through her chest. "How do they even know we're here?" "That's what the king wants to know." Footsteps on the stairs announced more arrivals. Michael entered, followed by Generals Linda and James. The Vampire King looked transformed from the night before. His skin had more color. His movements were stronger, his presence more commanding. But his eyes still held that deep exhaustion, like someone carrying a weight too heavy to ever fully put down. "Jennifer," he nodded to her. "How do you feel?" "Like I donated a few pints to a very persuasive vampire." She stood, wobbling slightly. "David says we have company. The worst kind." Michael moved to a desk in the corner, spreading out what looked like surveillance photos. "Project Eclipse. Your father mentioned them in his notes. A Black Ops program started in the 1990s, designed to weaponize supernatural elements. They were shut down after the Boston incident in 2004. "What incident?" Jennifer moved closer. Looking at the photos, they showed vampires in cages, experimental weapons, documents marked with heavy redaction. 12 vampires captured and experimented on, James said grimly. The project director wanted to synthesize vampire essence into a serum that could enhance human soldiers. Your father was part of the team that exposed them, Michael added. He never told me any of this, Jennifer whispered, staring at a photo of her father, younger in military fatigue, standing outside what looked like a bunker facility. He was protecting you. Michael's finger tapped another photo. This is Colonel Robert Davis, the director of Project Eclipse. Your father's testimony put him in front of a military tribunal. He was dishonorably discharged. The man in the photo had a hard face and colder eyes. Even in a still image, he looked dangerous. Davis has been trying to restart the program for years, Michael finished. And he wants revenge on the Miller family. His crimson eyes met Jennifer's. You're not just caught between vampire courts. You're caught between supernatural and human politics. They must have been monitoring your father's house, James added. Saw the attack yesterday and followed us here. A sharp whistle cut through the conversation, a warning signal. Another vampire appeared at the door, breathing hard. My king, the humans are moving. 20 soldiers advancing on the cathedral. They won't breach the wards, Linda said confidently. They don't need to. Michael's jaw tightened. They just need to keep us pinned here while Robert regroups. He turned to Jennifer. This is why your father wanted to end the blood debt. He knew that being tied to me made you a target from both sides. So what do we do? Jennifer asked. Before Michael could answer, an explosion rocked the cathedral. Stone dust rained from the ceiling, and the ancient building groaned. Through the window, Jennifer saw smoke rising from the eastern wall. They breached the wards, James said, shocked. That's impossible. Another explosion. Closer. The window shattered, and David pulled Jennifer away from the glass. They have someone who knows vampire magic, Michael realized. Someone who understands our defenses. A voice boomed from outside, amplified by a megaphone. Michael Aurelius, King of the East Coast Courts. This is Colonel Robert Davis, United States Special Operations. You are harboring a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. Release Jennifer Miller and we'll withdraw peacefully. Liar, Linda hissed. The moment they have her, they'll use her to draw you out. I know. Michael moved toward the door, which is why we're not giving them the chance. Linda, James, evacuate everyone to the northern tunnels. David, stay with Jennifer. What are you going to do? Jennifer grabbed his arm. Talk to them. Michael gently removed her hand. I've spent 300 years avoiding human attention. Your father understood that exposure would mean war. But if Davis wants me that badly, better he focuses on me than you. They'll try to capture you, James warned. Let them try. Michael's smile showed fangs. The ritual gave me back enough strength to remind these humans why their ancestors feared the night. He started for the stairs, but Jennifer's voice stopped him. My father's research. Where would he have hidden it? Michael paused. He had a safety deposit box, Bank of Boston, downtown branch, but I don't know the box number or how to access it. I do. Jennifer pulled her father's keyring from her pocket. She'd grabbed it from his house yesterday before the attack. Among the keys was a small brass one, different from the others, with a number engraved on it, 847. He gave me this keyring the day before he died. Said I should keep it safe, that I'd know when I needed it. Michael stared at the key. He was preparing you even then. We need to get to that box, Jennifer said. Whatever's inside, it might be our only chance. Another explosion shook the cathedral. Voices shouted outside, and Jennifer heard the distinctive sound of boots on stone, soldiers entering the building. Go, Michael ordered. Linda, get her to the city. James, you're with me. Sire. Linda started to protest. That's an order, General. Jennifer's life is worth more than this cathedral. Michael's eyes blazed. And if Davis wants a war, I'll give him one, and he'll never forget. He descended the stairs like an avenging angel, James following. Moments later, Jennifer heard screams, human screams, full of terror. We need to move now, Linda said, pulling Jennifer toward a hidden door in the back wall. The tunnels will take us 10 feet north. But Michael? Jennifer asked, even as Linda dragged her into the darkness of the escape route. The king can handle himself. You, however, are mortal and vulnerable. Linda's ice-blue eyes gleamed in the dark. And whether I like it or not, you're the key to saving him. They ran through tunnels that smelled of earth and age. David and 3 other vampires flanking them. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded. Gunfire, screams, the crash of falling stone. When they finally emerged into daylight, hidden by trees 2 miles from the cathedral, Jennifer turned back. She could see smoke rising above the forest, hear distant explosions. "He'll be okay," David said quietly, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. He survived worse, but Jennifer felt it through the bond. Pain, rage, and underneath it all, grim determination. Michael was fighting for his life, and she was running away to a bank to find research that might not even help. She touched the bandage on her palm, feeling her blood pulse beneath it. Blood that now carried Michael's essence, just as his carried hers. "Let's go," she said, climbing into the waiting car. "My father died protecting whatever's in that safety deposit box." As they drove away, Jennifer took one last look at the smoke rising over the trees and silently promised, "I'm coming back for you." The Bank of Boston's downtown branch looked absurdly normal. Marble floors, security guards with bored expressions, customers waiting in line for tellers. Jennifer felt like she'd stepped from one world into another, from vampire kings and underground cathedrals back into mundane reality. Except reality was now hunting her from both sides. "Stay close," Linda murmured, her hand resting casually on Jennifer's elbow. To anyone watching, they looked like friends running errands. No one could see the blade hidden in Linda's sleeve or the 3 other vampires positioned around the bank's perimeter. Jennifer approached the safety deposit desk, key clutched in her sweating palm. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain, smiled pleasantly. "Can I help you?" "I need to access box 847. Jennifer's voice sounded steadier than she felt. "It was my father's, John Miller." The woman's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss. I'll need to see identification and verify your access rights." Jennifer provided her driver's license and the death certificate she'd been carrying since the funeral. The clerk typed slowly, checking records, and with each passing second, Jennifer felt more exposed. Davis's people could be anywhere, watching, waiting. "Everything appears to be in order." They descended into the vault, a sterile room lined with metal boxes. The clerk used her master key in combination with Jennifer's key, pulling out a long metal drawer. "Take your time, press the button when you're finished." Once alone, Jennifer opened the drawer with trembling hands. Inside was a leather journal, a USB drive, and a photograph she'd never seen before. Her father and Michael sitting on the hood of a car, both laughing. Her father's arm was thrown around Michael's shoulders like they were brothers. The journal's first page had a single line in her father's handwriting. "If you're reading this, trust no one, not even him." Jennifer's blood ran cold. Trust no one, not even. Did he mean Michael? She flipped through pages of research notes, diagrams of the blood debt structure, chemical formulas she didn't understand, and then halfway through a section titled "The Truth About Blood Debts." Her father's writing grew more frantic here, words underlined multiple times. Blood debts don't naturally end in mutual destruction. That's vampire propaganda designed to force early sacrifice. She kept reading. "I've found records of ancient blood debts lasting centuries without decay. The difference? Those vampires never formed emotional attachments to their human debtors. They maintained clinical distance. But Michael, he's gotten too close to my father. Force him to want to break the oath. It goes against everything I believe. But to save Jennifer, I have to destroy the friendship I've spent 20 years building. Tomorrow, I meet with Robert. I'm going to give him information that will turn the vampire courts against Michael. Make him seem weak, corruptible." He thought the blood debt was an unavoidable curse. Thought he was protecting her out of honor when really... Footsteps echoed outside the vault room. Too many footsteps. Jennifer grabbed the journal and USB drive, shoving them into her jacket. She pressed the button for the clerk, trying to keep her breathing steady. But the door opened to reveal not the clerk but Linda, and behind her, 5 vampires in black armor. Not Michael's guards. These wore the insignia of the West Coast courts. "I'm sorry," Linda said, and actually sounded like she meant it. But the general was right. One human life isn't worth our king's destruction. Jennifer backed away. "You're working with Robert." "I'm saving Michael from himself." Linda stepped into the vault. He spent 138 years sacrificing his power, his position, his very life for a family of humans. It ends now. Robert has promised me that if I deliver you, he'll spare the East Coast courts. Everyone survives. Everyone except you. The ritual was a temporary fix. You know it, and I know it. In 3 weeks, you'll both be dead anyway. Linda's ice-blue eyes were hard. This way, only one person dies. It's simple mathematics. Michael will never forgive you, Jennifer said, still backing toward the wall of safety deposit boxes. He will eventually, when he's alive and strong again, when the East Coast courts are secure, when he's had centuries to forget one stubborn human girl. Linda drew her blade. I've served him for 200 years. I know what he needs better than he does. The West Coast court vampires fanned out, blocking the exit. Jennifer's mind raced. She couldn't fight, couldn't run. But maybe Linda... David's voice echoed from somewhere above. Linda, where are you? The king is... His words cut off in a gurgle. Something heavy hit the floor. David was loyal to the end. Rage flooded through Jennifer, hot and fierce and completely unlike anything she'd felt before. David, who'd brought her breakfast and tried to make her smile, dead because Linda had decided Jennifer's life was expendable. The rage must have shown on her face because Linda actually took a step back. Don't make this harder, then. Jennifer's hand found the pocket watch in her jacket, the one that had started ticking after her father's death. She pulled it out, and the moment her skin touched the metal, she felt it, Michael's essence burning inside her from the ritual. Responding to her fury, the watch began to glow. That's impossible, Linda breathed. Jennifer threw the watch. It sailed through the air and shattered against the wall. And where it broke, crimson light exploded outward, not destroying but calling the bond. Jennifer realized the blood bond between her and Michael. She was pulling on it like a lifeline, screaming through the connection. Help me. Clever, Linda admitted, but he's too far away. By the time he arrives, you'll be... The vault's wall exploded inward, not the door, not a window. The solid marble wall simply shattered, and through the dust and debris strode Michael, his eyes blazing like hellfire. He was covered in blood, some of it his own, most of it not. His coat was torn. His skin showed burns from UV weapons, and he moved with the barely contained violence of a predator whose territory had been invaded. Linda, he said quietly, and his voice was more terrifying for its softness. My king, Linda started. The West Coast court vampires actually cowed, and even Linda took 3 quick steps backward. Michael crossed the space to Jennifer in 2 strides, his hands gentle despite his fury as he checked her for injuries. Are you hurt? No, but David is healing upstairs, stabbed, not dead. Michael's eyes never left Linda, though the same cannot be said for the vampires who attacked him. Sire, please understand, Linda said, her composure cracking. I'm trying to save you by murdering the daughter of the man who gave me life. Michael's voice could have frozen oceans. By betraying every oath you've ever sworn to me. The debt is killing you. I've watched you fade for decades, sacrificing yourself for humans who die in a blink. Linda's eyes shone with unshed tears, the first emotion Jennifer had seen from her. I can't watch you die, not for this. That, Michael said softly, was never your choice to make. He raised his hand, and the West Coast court vampires turned to ash where they stood, not dramatically, not with screams, but simply ceasing to exist, ancient power barely controlled. Linda dropped to her knees. Sire, you were my general, my friend, someone I trusted with my life. Michael's voice broke slightly, and you would have killed her, killed someone under my protection, bearing my essence, bound to my very soul. To save you, Linda whispered. I never asked to be saved. Michael looked at her for a long moment, and Jennifer saw genuine grief in his crimson eyes. You're banished, Linda. Leave the East Coast courts, and never return. If I see you again, old friendship won't stay my hand. Linda stood slowly, her face pale even for a vampire. She looked at Jennifer, and something almost like apology flickered in her ice-blue eyes. Then she was gone, moving faster than sight. Alone in the destroyed vault, Michael finally allowed himself to sag. Jennifer caught his arm and through the bond felt the pain radiating through him, physical and emotional. "Robert?" she asked. "Retreated. For now." Michael's hand covered hers on his arm. "They lost 15 soldiers. The colonel won't be eager to engage again without better intelligence." "Michael, my father's research—" Jennifer pulled out the journal. "You need to read this." But before she could explain, James appeared in the shattered wall opening, breathing hard. "Sire, we have a problem. Robert isn't regrouping. He's heading to the place where this all began." Michael went very still. "The warehouse?" "Yes, and he's bringing everyone. He's calling it a formal challenge for leadership of both courts." James's expression was grim. "If you don't show, you forfeit. The East Coast courts fall to Western rule. And if I do show? Single combat to the death. Victor takes all." James looked between them. "He knows you're weakened. He's counting on it." Michael stood straight, forcing strength into his frame. "Then we don't disappoint him. Gather everyone loyal to me. We end this tonight." "Wait," Jennifer said, clutching the journal. "You don't understand the blood debt. It's not what you think. My father found—" "Later." Michael's hand cupped her face gently. "Right now, I need to ensure you survive long enough to tell me." He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it broke Jennifer's heart. And then he was gone, moving with James back toward whatever final battle awaited. Jennifer stood alone in the destroyed vault, holding her father's last words, knowing the truth, but unable to speak it to the one person who needed to hear it most. The more a vampire cares about their debtor, the more the debt consumes them. And Michael, she realized with dawning horror, cared far too much. The warehouse stood exactly as it had 20 years ago. According to Michael, a hulking skeleton of rusted metal and broken windows in Boston's abandoned industrial district. This was where John Miller had saved a vampire king's life, where everything had begun. Now it would be where everything ended. Jennifer crouched behind a shipping container 200 yards away, watching vampires gather in the open space before the warehouse. Dozens of them, maybe 100, split into clear factions. On the left, Michael's loyalists, his remaining guards, East Coast court vampires who still believed in him. On the right, Robert's forces, larger, better armed, confident. "You shouldn't be here," James said beside her. He tried to make her stay at a safe house, but she'd simply followed anyway. "If things go badly, I need to talk to Michael, before this starts." Jennifer clutched her father's journal. "James, the blood debt, it's not what any of you think. My father discovered—" "Miss Miller." James's dark eyes were kind but firm. "Whatever your father discovered, it won't matter if our king dies tonight. Robert will challenge him to single combat. Ancient law. No one can interfere once it begins." "Can Michael win?" James was quiet for too long. "At full strength, without question. As he is now, weakened by the debt, wounded from Davis's attack," he shook his head. "Robert is counting on him being too honorable to back down and too weak to win." Below, Michael emerged from the warehouse's main entrance. Even from this distance, Jennifer could see he'd cleaned up. New coat, hair tied back, every inch the king he was supposed to be. But she felt his exhaustion through the bond, felt the pain he was hiding beneath his regal bearing. Robert stepped forward to meet him, and the crowd of vampires fell silent. "Michael Aurelius," Robert's voice carried across the space, "I challenge you for leadership of the East Coast and West Coast courts. Single combat according to the old laws. Do you accept?" "I accept," Michael said simply, "on one condition. You're not in a position to make conditions." Nevertheless, Michael's eyes swept the gathered vampires. "When I win, all those who sided with you receive amnesty. No executions, no banishments. We unify as one court, not as conquerors and conquered." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even some of Robert's supporters looked surprised. "And when I win," Robert asked, "the East Coast courts are yours. Do with them what you will." Michael's voice dropped. "But you leave Jennifer Miller alone. The blood debt voids with my death. She becomes just another human beneath your notice." "No!" Jennifer started forward, but James grabbed her arm. "Don't!" he hissed. "You'll only distract him." "Agreed," Robert said, smiling. "Though I find it touching that your last thoughts are of your pet human." He drew a long blade. "Silver," Jennifer realized with horror. "Shall we begin?" Michael drew his own blade. "One more thing, Robert. After you lose tonight, after your ambition has cost you everything, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you chose pride over peace, chose power over loyalty. Save the speech for your eulogy, Robert attacked. The battle was too fast for Jennifer's human eyes to fully follow. Blades clashed in blurs of silver, the two vampires moving faster than thought. Michael was skilled, 300 years of experience in every parry and strike. But Jennifer felt his weakness through the bond. Each movement cost him. Each blow he blocked sent pain radiating through their connection. Robert was relentless, pressing his advantage, driving Michael backward toward the warehouse wall. "I have to stop this," Jennifer said desperately. "James, there has to be a way." "There isn't. The old laws are absolute." James's jaw clenched. "All we can do is watch." Steel rang against steel. Michael ducked under a strike that would have taken his head off, rolled, came up slashing. His blade caught Robert's shoulder, drawing dark blood, but Robert's counterstrike was faster, and his silver blade carved a line across Michael's chest. Michael staggered, and Jennifer felt his pain like it was her own. Burning, agonizing, the silver poisoning spreading through him. "Get up," she whispered. "Please get up." Michael rose slower this time. Blood soaked through his shirt. Jennifer felt his life force flickering. "You're dying," Robert said, circling like a shark. "The human blood in your veins is reacting to the silver. Ironic, isn't it? The very thing that saved you is now killing you." "Then finish it," Michael said quietly. "No." Jennifer broke free from James's grip and ran down the hill before he could stop her. "No, you don't get to give up." She burst through the circle of vampires, 100 pairs of inhuman eyes turning toward her, and stumbled to a stop between Michael and Robert. "Jennifer, get back," Michael started. "Shut up." She spun to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Just shut up and listen to me. The blood debt, it's not killing you, you're killing yourself." She thrust her father's journal at him. "My father figured it out. The decay, the end point, all of it. It's not inevitable, it's guilt. You're punishing yourself for being saved, for surviving when others died, for caring about the humans who protected you. The more you care, the more it consumes you." Michael stared at the journal, then at her. "That's not— It is. Blood debts can last forever if the vampire wants them to. But you don't want to live with this burden anymore. You never have." Jennifer's voice broke. "My father died trying to make you hate him, trying to give you a reason to break the oath because he knew you'd never choose your own life over honoring the debt." The gathered vampires were deathly silent, all watching this human girl confronting their king. "Your father." Michael's hand trembled as he took the journal. "He betrayed me to save you." "He loved you," Jennifer said, "like a brother, and he knew that meant you'd die for me the same way you'd have died for him. So he made himself the villain, made you think he turned on you." She touched the wound on his chest, her hand coming away bloody. "Read his last entry, the truth about what he told Robert." Michael opened the journal with shaking hands, his crimson eyes scanning the final page. As he read, his expression shattered, grief and understanding, and terrible, aching regret, all washing over his features. "He told Robert that I was going insane," Michael whispered. "That the blood debt had corrupted me, made me betray vampire interests for human sentiment. He destroyed my reputation, turned the West Coast courts against me, all to—" His voice broke. "All to make me angry enough to sever the bond and save you." "But you never did," Jennifer said softly. "Even thinking he betrayed you, you couldn't break the oath, because that's who you are, Michael. You keep your promises even when they destroy you." Michael looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, Jennifer saw him without the weight of 300 years of guilt and duty. Just a person, exhausted and hurting, and desperately trying to do the right thing. "I'm so tired," he admitted. "I've been tired for so long. I know." Jennifer took his hand, their blood mingling where they touched. "But you don't have to carry this alone anymore. That's what my father was trying to tell you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Choose to live, Michael, not for honor or duty or debt. Just choose to live." "Touching," Robert interrupted coldly, "but irrelevant. The challenge stands. Unless," he smiled cruelly, "the great Michael Aurelius wishes to forfeit to save his strength for his precious human." Michael looked at Robert, then at the gathered vampires, then back at Jennifer. She saw him making a choice, not between life and death, but between the king he'd been and the person he could be. "I forfeit," he said clearly. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Even Robert looked shocked. "What?" "I forfeit the challenge." Michael's voice grew stronger. "I've spent 3 centuries ruling, fighting, making choices that saved our kind but cost me everything that makes existence worth living. No more." He turned to his gathered loyalists. "James, you have my blessing to lead. General David, support him. The rest of you, follow Robert if you want power. Follow James if you want peace. I'm done." "You can't just walk away," Robert snarled. "The courts will survive without me. They always do." Michael pulled Jennifer against his side, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a tilting world. "I choose her. I choose life. And I choose to finally, after 300 years, be free." Silence. Then slowly, James knelt. Then David. Then one by one, every vampire in Michael's guard dropped to one knee. "We follow you still, my king," James said quietly. Even some of Robert's supporters looked uncertain now, glancing between their would-be leader and the king who'd just given up everything. Robert's face twisted with rage. "Then you die anyway!" He lunged, silver blade aimed at Michael's heart. But Jennifer was faster. She didn't think, didn't plan, just moved, throwing herself forward, her hand catching Robert's wrist. The moment she touched him, crimson light exploded from her palm. Michael's essence living in her blood, her father's essence passed down through generations, and her own will, fierce and absolute. "No one else dies tonight." The light consumed Robert's blade, turning the silver to ash. It raced up his arm and he screamed, a sound of pure agony, as the combined essence of 5 generations of Millers burned through him. "That's for my father," Jennifer said through gritted teeth, "and for every person you've hurt to feed your ambition." Robert crumpled, his body unable to withstand the force of a bloodline that had been protecting vampires since 1887. He didn't turn to ash, didn't die dramatically. He simply collapsed, powerless and broken. Jennifer stood over him, her hand still glowing. She felt Michael behind her, steady and solid. "It's over," Michael said softly. Robert's collapse should have ended it, should have sent his followers scattering, should have brought peace. Instead, it started a war. "Traitor!" One of Robert's generals, a vampire with scars crossing his face like a map of violence, drew twin blades. "The human wields vampire essence. She's an abomination. An aberration," another shouted. "Unnatural." The West Coast Court vampires erupted into chaos, half moving to retreat, half drawing weapons. All of them terrified of what Jennifer had just done because she was right. It shouldn't have been possible. Humans didn't channel vampire essence. Humans didn't burn through ancient vampires with a touch. "Stand down!" James roared, positioning himself between Jennifer and the advancing West Coast Court. Michael's loyalists formed a protective circle, weapons drawn. But they were still outnumbered, and Jennifer could feel Michael weakening behind her, his wound from the silver blade spreading poison through his system. "We need to get him out of here," David said urgently. "No one leaves." The scarred general pointed his blade at Michael. "You've corrupted a human bloodline with your essence, created a weapon." "The Crimson Council," Michael's laugh was bitter. "You want to involve the vampire capital in this? Very well. Let's see what the old council thinks of your failed coup." He swayed and Jennifer caught him. Through their bond she felt his heart. Yes, vampires had hearts. They just beat slower, struggling against the silver poison. "Michael, you can't." "I can." His crimson eyes met hers. "One more performance, then I rest. I promise." He straightened, pulling strength from somewhere deep inside. And his voice rang out across the warehouse yard. "Any vampire here may petition the Crimson Council for judgment. Is that what you want? To drag our internal disputes before the old council? To admit that the East Coast and West Coast courts are so weak they couldn't handle one human girl?" Murmurs rippled through both factions. The Crimson Council was legend, the seat of vampire government, hidden somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, ruled by vampires so old they'd walked the earth when Rome was young. No one involved the Crimson Council unless absolutely necessary, because their judgments were final and often brutal. The human is dangerous, the scarred general insisted, but his voice had lost some certainty. The human is protected. Michael's shout echoed off the warehouse walls. By a blood oath older than most of you, by 5 generations of sacrifice, by ancient law that even the Crimson Council would uphold. You want to challenge that? Go ahead, petition the council. But know this, he stepped forward, and despite his wounds, despite his exhaustion, he looked every inch the king. If you force the Crimson Council to judgment, they will investigate everything. The West Coast Court's alliance with human military forces, the decades of undermining East Coast Court authority, every secret you've buried, every law you've bent, all of it will come to light. The vampires shifted uneasily. Even Jennifer, who barely understood vampire politics, could sense the threat in Michael's words. He wasn't just protecting her, he was threatening to expose everyone. Or, Michael continued, his voice softening, we end this now. Robert is defeated. His challenge failed. The courts remain separate but at peace, and Jennifer Miller returns to her human life, bothering no one. But she has vampire essence, someone argued. She's a liability. She's a data analyst from Boston, David interjected. What's she going to do, weaponize spreadsheets? Despite the tension, a few vampires actually laughed, but the scarred general wasn't satisfied. The law is clear. Humans who learn of our existence must be dealt with, either turned, bound, or killed. Jennifer found her voice. That's your solution? Kill everyone who discovers you exist. It survived us for millennia, the general said coldly. No. Jennifer pulled away from Michael, standing on her own despite her trembling legs. What survived you is fear, secrecy, always hiding, always running. My family spent 5 generations protecting your king. And what has it gotten any of us? My father died alone keeping your secrets. My great-great-grandfather spent his life looking over his shoulder. All of you, she gestured at the gathered vampires, living in shadows, pretending the modern world doesn't exist. What would you have us do? James asked, genuinely curious. Announce ourselves. That worked so well in Salem. I'd have you stop treating humans like threats or resources. Jennifer's voice strengthened. Start treating us like what we are, people sharing a world with you. My father proved it was possible. 20 years of friendship with a vampire king. No one died, no secrets were exposed, just coexistence. Pretty speech, the scarred general said, but naive. Your father's dead, killed by this very situation. My father died because vampires like Robert couldn't accept peace, Jennifer shot back. Because your politics matter more than people's lives. Because you'd rather fight each other than admit maybe the old ways aren't working anymore. She turned in a slow circle, looking at all of them. West Coast Court, East Coast Court. The uncertain faces of vampires who'd lived centuries but maybe hadn't really thought about what they were living for. The blood debt ends tonight, Jennifer said. Not because I'm dying, not because Michael's dying, but because we're choosing to end it. No more bloodline obligation, no more guilt, no more debt, just freedom. You can't just end a blood debt, Linda's voice came from the shadows. The former general stepped into view, her face gaunt, her eyes haunted. The bond is sealed by blood and oath. Only death or the Crimson Council can break it. Then take me there, Jennifer said immediately. To the Crimson Council, let them judge. Let them decide if a human and a vampire can choose their own fate. Jennifer, no! Michael grabbed her arm. The Crimson Council is dangerous. They don't think like younger vampires. They see humans as what? Cattle? Pets? Jennifer met his eyes. Then maybe it's time someone reminded them we're not. That we're brave and stubborn and capable of loving people. Even vampire people who everyone says we should fear. Silence fell over the warehouse yard. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally, an ancient voice spoke from the warehouse entrance, a voice like wind over gravestones, like the whisper of dead leaves. How curious. A human requests audience with the Crimson Council. Every vampire dropped to one knee. Even Michael, wounded as he was, knelt. A figure emerged from the darkness, so old that gender seemed irrelevant, with skin like parchment and eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. They wore simple robes of deep crimson, and power radiated from them like heat from a furnace. "Lord Arthur," Michael said. Head bowed. "We didn't know the Crimson Council was watching." "The Council watches everything, young king, especially upheavals that threaten our kind's survival." Those ancient eyes fixed on Jennifer, the only person still standing. "You, child of the Miller bloodline, you truly wish to stand before the Council." Jennifer's knees wanted to buckle. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she thought of her father giving his blood to save a vampire, of her great-great-grandfather pulling Michael from a burning church, of 5 generations of Millers choosing courage over fear. "Yes," she said. Lord Arthur smiled, a terrible, knowing expression. "Then you shall have your audience, at the Crimson Hall 3 nights from now." At the new moon, they looked at David. "Bring her and pray the Council finds her." Amusing. "And if they don't," Michael asked before he could stop himself, "then she dies, and the blood debt ends the old-fashioned way, in blood and fire and screaming." Robert's smile widened. But what an entertaining death it would be. They vanished, simply ceasing to exist, leaving only the scent of old earth and older magic. Jennifer's legs finally gave out. David caught her, both of them supporting each other. 2 people bound by blood and fate and something neither had asked for but couldn't escape. "You just invited judgment from beings who make me look young," David said quietly. "They could kill you with a thought. Then we'd better prepare a very good argument." Linda looked up at him. 3 days to figure out how to end a 138-year-old blood debt, without either of us dying. "Think we can do it?" James laughed, exhausted, pained, but genuine. "With you, I'm starting to believe anything is possible around them." Vampires slowly rose from their knees. The Western Court began to retreat, carrying Mark's unconscious form. The crisis wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, there was a fragile peace, and 3 days to accomplish the impossible. "Can you walk?" Linda asked. "If you can," David replied. They walked together through the crowd of vampires, through the ruins of the warehouse where John Chen had first saved a vampire's life, out into the night that held both danger and hope in equal measure. Behind them, Robert began organizing guards. Michael started planning their journey. Patricia watched from the shadows, still banished, but unable to look away. And somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, in a hall built of crimson stone and old bones, the ancient council prepared to judge whether love and choice were stronger than blood and debt. 3 days the countdown had begun. The Crimson Hall was not a building, it was a wound in the earth. Linda stood at the entrance of a massive cave system carved into the Rocky Mountains, watching vampires emerge from the darkness like ghosts. Not dozens, hundreds. The ancient council had summoned witnesses from every court in North America, every bloodline, every clan. "They want to make an example of us," David said beside her. He'd spent the last 3 days recovering, letting Linda's blood, given freely in small amounts, heal the silver poisoning. But he was still weak, and they both knew it. Win or lose, the Hall wants everyone to see what happens when ancient law is challenged. Then let's give them a show worth watching. Linda squeezed his hand, feeling his cool fingers wrap around hers. Robert and Michael flanked them along with what remained of David's loyal guard, maybe 20 vampires against the hundreds gathering inside. Even Patricia had appeared at dawn, silent and watchful, neither ally nor enemy, but unable to stay away. They descended into the earth. The path spiraled down through caverns lit by bioluminescent fungi and torches that burned with blue flame. Vampire glyphs covered the walls, the history of their kind written in blood and stone. Linda saw images of ancient battles, of the first vampires rising, of humans and vampires locked in eternal conflict. At the bottom, the Crimson Hall itself opened before them. It was a natural amphitheater of red stone, large enough to hold 1,000 vampires. Ancient pillars rose to a ceiling lost in shadow, and at the center, on a raised platform of black marble, sat the 5 members of the old council. Lord Robert, who had summoned them, sat in the middle. To their left was a woman who looked carved from ice, her white hair flowing to the ground. To their right, a man whose skin was dark as midnight, covered in scarification that glowed faintly. The other two council members were harder to look at. Their forms seemed to shift and blur as if they existed slightly out of phase with reality. "David Anderson," Robert's voice echoed through the chamber. "King of the Eastern Courts, you stand accused of corrupting human blood with vampire essence, creating an aberration against natural law. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," David said clearly. "I gave blood to save a dying man. The Chen family's unusual reaction to vampire essence was not my doing, but their own unique biology." "Yet you perpetuated it," the Ice Lady said, her voice brittle, sharp. "5 generations. Each time a Chen saved your life, you bound them deeper. You created a bloodline of half-breeds." "They're not," Linda started, but Robert grabbed her arm. "Don't speak unless addressed," he whispered urgently. "They'll kill you for the disrespect." "Let her speak," the dark-skinned counselor leaned forward. "I would hear what this human has to say. It has been centuries since one stood before us." All eyes turned to Linda. 1,000 vampires watching, waiting, many hoping she'd fail so they could watch her die. Linda thought of her father, of his courage, of 5 generations of Chens who'd chosen to help instead of hate. "I'm not an aberration," she said, voice shaking but clear. "I'm the result of kindness. My great-great-grandfather saved a vampire from burning because he believed everyone deserved mercy. Each generation after made the same choice, not because of magic or obligation, but because they saw someone worth saving." "Sentiment," the Ice Lady said dismissively. "Human emotion irrelevant." "Is it?" Linda took a step forward, ignoring Robert's hiss of warning. "You call it corruption, but what if it's evolution? What if humans and vampires don't have to be enemies? My father and David were friends, real friends, for 20 years. Doesn't that prove coexistence is possible?" "Your father is dead," Robert observed, "killed by the very situation his kindness created. My father died because vampires like Mark can't accept change," Linda's voice rose. "Because your old laws prioritize power over people. He died trying to save both me and David from a system that says one of us has to die. And yet here you both stand," the dark-skinned counselor said thoughtfully. "Bound by blood, dying by inches, the debt consuming you both." He looked at David. "Why not simply complete the ritual? Take her blood, her essence, her life. Save yourself." "Because she's not mine to take," David said quietly. "She's a person, not a resource. And I've spent 300 years learning that survival without conscience isn't survival. It's just existence." "Pretty words from a dying king," the Ice Lady sneered. "You've grown weak, David, corrupted by human sentiment. Perhaps your death would remind our kind why we don't form attachments to mortals." "Then kill me," David said, and the chamber went deathly silent. "I offer myself for judgment. Let Linda go free untouched, her bloodline released from all obligation. Take my life in payment for whatever laws I've broken." "No." Linda lunged forward, but Michael caught her. "You can't. We came here to break the bond, not— There is another option." One of the shifting counselors spoke for the first time, their voice like whispered through empty rooms. "A test to prove whether this bond is corruption or evolution." "What kind of test?" David asked wearily. The counselors smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Trial of essence. You both claim the bond is based on choice, on mutual sacrifice. Prove it. Let us see which of you loves the other more." Linda felt ice flood her veins. "What does that mean?" "It means," Robert said, leaning forward with terrible interest, "that we will place both of you in the ritual circle, your blood, his essence, both freely given. But here's the twist. Only one of you can survive. The ritual will take the life force of whoever holds back, whoever hesitates, whoever loves themselves more than the other." "That's insane," Robert breathed. "You're asking them to—" "To prove their bond is real," the dark-skinned counselor finished. "If they truly choose each other over themselves, the bond will break clean. One dies willingly, one lives free. But if either hesitates, if doubt enters their heart, both will die in agony as the ritual tears them apart." Linda looked at David, and saw understanding dawn in his crimson eyes. This was the Crimson Hall's judgment, not mercy, but cruelty, dressed as justice. They would both pour their essence into the ritual, both try to sacrifice themselves, and whichever one held back even slightly would be consumed. It was a test neither could win, because neither would choose to survive at the other's expense. "We accept," David said before Linda could speak. "David, no." "We accept," he repeated, his hand finding hers, "because I know the truth. Linda Chen will not let me die, and I will not let her die. And somewhere in that impossibility, we'll find a way." The council exchanged glances, and Linda saw something in their ancient faces. Not cruelty, but curiosity. They genuinely wanted to see what would happen, wanted to see if love could break what centuries of law had established. "Then let the trial begin," Robert declared. "Bring forth the ritual circle." Vampires moved with practiced precision, drawing symbols on the stone floor with liquid that glowed like captured starlight. The circle was massive, 20 feet across, covered in glyphs that hurt to look at directly. Linda and David were led to opposite sides of the circle. A blade was placed in each of their hands, ceremonial, wickedly sharp. "When the moon reaches its zenith," Robert explained, "you will both cut your palms and let your blood flow into the circle. The ritual will activate, and your essences will merge. Whichever of you surrenders their life force completely, choosing death to save the other, will be consumed. The survivor goes free, bond broken, debt fulfilled." "And if we both try to sacrifice ourselves?" Linda asked. The Ice Lady actually laughed. "Then you both die screaming, torn apart by competing magics. The bond breaks through mutual destruction, the very fate you are trying to avoid." Linda looked across the circle at David. Even now, wounded and exhausted, he stood tall, a king who'd ruled for 3 centuries, who'd survived wars and betrayals and the slow poison of guilt. And he was smiling at her. A sad, gentle smile that said, "I'm sorry." "No," she mouthed at him. His smile widened. High above, through gaps in the cavern ceiling, Linda could see the night sky. The moon was rising, approaching its zenith. They had maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes to figure out how to outsmart a ritual designed by vampires who'd been alive since before America existed. 5 minutes to save each other from themselves. "David," she called across the circle, "do you remember what my father wrote about why the debt was killing you?" His brow furrowed. "That it was guilt, self-punishment, that you were choosing to die." Linda's mind raced. The debt responds to will, to choice. That's what makes it powerful. What if... She stopped, an impossible idea forming. "What if we both choose life?" "The ritual requires a sacrifice," the dark-skinned counselor started. "The ritual requires a choice," Linda interrupted, too desperate to care about offending ancient vampires. "One of us has to surrender completely, to give everything." She looked at David. "What if we both surrender? Not our lives, our guilt, our pain, all the reasons we think we deserve to die instead of live." "That's not..." Robert frowned. "That's not how the ritual works, isn't it?" David's eyes lit with understanding. "A sacrifice doesn't have to be death. It can be ego, the belief that we're somehow responsible for everyone who ever suffered because of us." He looked at the council. "My guilt has been killing me for 138 years. What if I give that up instead? What if I choose to forgive myself?" The 5 council members exchanged shocked glances. "That's..." The Ice Lady struggled for words. "That's not..." "That's brilliant," the dark-skinned counselor said softly, "and completely untested. It could work, or it could kill you both instantly." The moon reached its zenith, and the circle flared to life, glowing with crimson light. Linda looked at David across the expanse of magic. "Together?" "Together?" he agreed. They cut their palms, blood flowed, and everything went white. Pain. Not the sharp agony of a blade or the burning of silver poison, but something deeper. Linda felt her essence being pulled from her body like thread from a spool. Every memory, every emotion, every moment of her life flowing into the circle of light. Across from her, David was dissolving. His form flickered like a candle flame in wind, crimson mist rising from his skin as his vampire essence poured into the ritual. "Choose," the magic seemed to whisper. "Choose who lives, choose who dies." But Linda wasn't choosing death. She was choosing to let go. Every regret, every what-if, every moment she blamed herself for not being enough, she gave it all to the circle. The guilt of not being there when her father died, the shame of being weak, human, helpless, the fear that she wasn't worth the sacrifice 5 generations of Chens had made. "I forgive myself," she thought, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Across the circle, David was doing the same. She could feel it through their bond. Him releasing 300 years of survivor's guilt. The weight of everyone who died to save him. The shame of being the monster humans feared. The burden of being a king when all he'd wanted was to be a person. "I forgive myself." His thoughts echoed hers. The ritual shuddered. This wasn't what it was designed for. It wanted a life, wanted death, wanted the clean ending of sacrifice and suffering, but they were giving it something else. Something it had never tasted. Freedom. The crimson light exploded outward, and Linda felt herself falling, not down, but sideways, into a space between moments where time moved differently. She saw everything. Her great-great-grandfather pulling David from the burning church, their eyes meeting across flames. Mutual recognition of kindness in a cruel world. Her grandfather giving blood to cure silver poisoning. David weeping as he drank. Both of them understanding the weight of the debt they were creating. Her uncle dying to save David from an ambush. Her father 20 years ago bleeding himself nearly to death in that warehouse, and David catching him as he fell. Both of them laughing through tears at the absurdity of a vampire and a human becoming brothers. And now her, the last Chen, the end of the line or the beginning of something new, a voice whispered. Not the councils, not the rituals, but something older. The magic itself. Curious about these 2 strange beings who'd chosen to break its rules. The light dimmed. Linda found herself on her knees on cold stone, gasping. Her palm was still bleeding, but the wound was closing as she watched, healing faster than it should, but not vampire fast. Human fast, just enhanced. Across the circle, David collapsed forward, caught by Robert and Michael. His skin was still pale, his eyes still crimson, but something had changed. He looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "Impossible," the Ice Lady breathed. "Not impossible," the dark-skinned counselor said, leaning forward with fascination. "Just unprecedented. Look at the circle." The glowing symbols were rewriting themselves, ancient glyphs shifting into new patterns. Where there had been bindings and obligations, now there were only connections freely chosen, easily broken, held together by nothing but choice. "The blood debt is gone, Sir," Robert said slowly, as if not quite believing his own words. "Completely severed. But the bond remains, transformed into something we have no name for." "Friendship," Linda said, still catching her breath. "The name is friendship." "Impossible," the Ice Lady repeated. "Humans and vampires cannot be—" "And yet," David interrupted, rising on shaking legs, "here we are alive, both of us. The debt fulfilled not through death but through choice." He looked at the council. "My guilt nearly destroyed us both. But Linda showed me that surviving isn't a crime. Living isn't something I need to apologize for." "The Chen bloodline is free," the dark-skinned counselor declared. "The blood debt spanning 138 years and 5 generations is satisfied. David Anderson, you are released from your oath. Linda Chen, you are released from your burden." Silence fell over the Crimson Hall. 1,000 vampires processed what they just witnessed, the impossible made real. Then slowly one vampire began to clap, then another, then dozens, hundreds, until the sound echoed through the cavern like thunder. Not all of them approved. Linda saw plenty of hostile faces, vampires who still believed the old ways were best. But enough had witnessed something that changed them. Enough had seen that maybe, just maybe, there was another path forward. "This session is concluded," Robert said, and Linda could have sworn she saw approval in those ancient eyes. "Let it be recorded that on this night the impossible occurred, and let our kind remember that even the oldest debts can be paid with something other than death. 3 weeks later, Linda stood in Oakwood Cemetery at dawn, placing flowers on 2 graves side by side. Her father's stone was weathered now, the granite beginning to age. Next to it, she'd had a second stone placed, not for a body, but for memory. "He's not dead, you know," a familiar voice said. Linda turned to find David approaching through the morning mist, 20 figures in black coats, following at a respectful distance. His honor guard still loyal despite his abdication, despite everything. "I know," Linda said, "but the man who carried that blood debt for 138 years, that version of you is gone. Seemed worth memorializing." David smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, no longer weighted by centuries of guilt. "Your father would have found that poetic and ridiculous." "He would have." Linda pulled something from her pocket, her father's pocket watch. It had stopped ticking the night of the ritual, the hands frozen at exactly midnight. She placed it on David's memorial stone for the vampire king, who learned to be just a person. "And what am I now?" David asked, genuinely curious. "Not quite human, not quite the king I was. Robert leads the Eastern courts, I'm just me." "You're free," Linda said. "We both are." She turned to leave, but David caught her hand. "Where will you go?" "Back to your cubicle? Your sandwich shop?" A laugh. "Actually, I was thinking of traveling. There's a whole world out there, and I've spent my whole life in Chicago. Maybe I'll visit Europe, see where your story started, all those centuries ago. Dangerous for a human alone. Good thing I know some vampires who owe me a favor." Then she squeezed his hand. Warm now. Or maybe she'd just gotten used to the coolness of his skin. "Want to come see the world not as a king, but as whatever you want to be." David looked at his memorial stone, at her father's grave, at the rising sun that no longer hurt him because he'd finally forgiven himself for surviving it. "Yes," he said, "I think I would." As they walked away side by side, a single red rose appeared on Linda's father's grave, placed by no visible hand, blooming despite the October cold. And on David's memorial stone, the pocket watch ticked once, just once, then fell silent forever. Behind them, the 20 vampires followed at a distance, no longer guards serving a king, but friends protecting someone they'd chosen to care about. Robert and Michael, even Patricia, who'd appeared one night to apologize and been welcomed back without question. They were an odd group, certainly, humans and vampires, bound not by magic or debt, but by the simple choice to walk the same path. Above them, the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and for the first time in 300 years, David Anderson watched a sunrise without guilt, without fear, without the weight of debts unpaid. Just watched it because it was beautiful. "Thank you," he said quietly to Linda. "For what?" "For showing me that the best way to honor the dead isn't to join them, it's to live. Really live." He looked at her, crimson eyes bright with something that might have been tears. Linda smiled, thinking of her father's last letter, of his final sacrifice to free them both. He knew, somehow he knew, that saving you meant saving me too, that we'd save each other. They walked on through the cemetery, through the gates, out into a world that held both darkness and light, danger and hope, endings and beginnings all tangled together. Behind them, on a grave marked with a fresh red rose, a small plaque caught the morning sun. Added just that morning, it read, "The debt is paid. The line is protected." And in the shadows between the headstones, if you looked carefully, you might have seen a figure tall and kind-faced, with a crooked smile watching them go. John Chen, or perhaps just a trick of the light, raising a hand in final farewell.